A cooking segment? My goodness.
I'll check my email.
Oh, my goodness. Kimberly, great.
Have a good one.
Great job, as always. Welcome, everybody, to the Ingraham Angle from Washington. What the president should do next year to improve his popularity and perhaps prevent a midterm wipeout. That's the focus of tonight's angle. With the economy up, ISIS pummeled, criminals deported, 12 appellate judges confirmed, regulation slashed, and consumer confidence high, one would think that the president's poll numbers would be above 50. Well, they're not. Of course, the usual suspects in the media, those same people who erroneously relied on polls in 2016, they're eager to hype the bad Trump news.
Today, we have a president with sinking approval ratings, an unpopular piece of legislation, the tax bill, supported by just one party.
24% approval rating among women. I've never seen a number that low.
The president's approval rating has fallen to 35%. That's a new low in our CNN polling.
That is something that is a record low for every president dating back to Eisenhower.
Well, all things considered, it is better to be a popular president rather than an unpopular one. Remember when Bush's popularity began to take a nosedive in 2005 because of the Iraq War and his response to Hurricane Katrina? That was brutal. Well, back then, W dismissed the reports of his low standing with the public. He didn't fret much or do much about it. Then, you remember, the Democrats went on to win the House, the Senate, and 36 governorships across America. Then what happened 2 years later with the economy in tatters? Bush's numbers cratered, and Barack Obama was elected. Now back to Trump. He has a strong populist core, and so, of course, he wants to be popular. And he understandably gets frustrated when his message doesn't seem to be breaking through. And truth be told, the president has made some missteps. He's not perfect. And, of course, the media pounced on them. The bungled travel ban, the firing of Jim Comey, and the decision probably to get involved in that Alabama Senate race at all. And then, of course, Democrats have harped on the phony Russian collusion story for a year. And this all had a cumulative effect on the public psyche. But now, with the economy poised to roar in 2018, liberals and their lapdogs in the press need a fresh narrative. They have to freshen it up. And citing the Roy Moore loss in Alabama and Gillespie's in Virginia, the New York Times and other outlets are reporting that suburban women, even those who voted for Trump, are turning on him. Well, they're supposed to be, I guess, put off by his brashness, his bluntness, his tweet storms, and now, well, say the CNN Trump bashers, his lack of empathy.
It's about expressing normal human emotion. It's about expressing condolences. He doesn't do that first. First, he exploits it for political purposes.
This administration, writ large, is engaged in a larger game of trying to contain the president's worst impulses.
What I hear people say, even diehard Trump people, is we want humanity in this country.
You know what? No politician can win without empathy. He won anyway, even with numbers that suggested people saying, we don't think he understands people like us. Is it catching up with him now?
Yes.
I think the answer is
you can't learn empathy.
You can't learn empathy. Well, I disagree with these clowns, and here's why. Maybe the president is sharing his empathy in a different way. And I'd argue that in his first year, President Trump has shown empathy for the people of this country in action, if not in words at all times. Think about his deep feeling for the working people, the middle class, Americans of faith, and job creators, entrepreneurs. It's all evident in his policies. So if ridding the suburbs of MS-13, lowering taxes, and improving school choice isn't showing empathy for the middle class, then what is it? If the massive deregulation and trade policies that are spurring job creation and driving the economy isn't showing empathy for the worker, then what is it? And I'll say, if driving black unemployment to an all-time low and laboring to get drugs off the streets isn't showing empathy to the African-American community, then what is it? To President Trump, I say the following. You've accomplished so much this year, but you're not going to ever get the press on your side. They're not going to give you credit. But I'll tell you this, more voters can and will be on your side with maybe just a few tweaks, a few modest changes. Perhaps the time has come to put aside a few of the Twitter battles. I like the tweets, but not all of them. And now it's time to humanize the agenda that you've been fighting for. You see, your predecessors, Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, were masterful emoters in chief. They could turn on the tear machine and like that. They could bear hug at the drop of a hat. And while they were often all emotion, they were at the same time often no action. I say it's possible to do both. You know, I was thinking today about that incredible event that you held, Mr. President, in August of 2016 with angel families who had lost loved ones at the hands of illegal aliens. It's an important reminder of how policy and empathy can align. And when you listen and teach, nobody does it better. And if that's not empathy, what is it? Then when Hurricane Harvey struck Houston and you visited the shelter housing flood victims, it was powerful. If that's not what empathy, what is? I like seeing you out among the people. I like seeing you with children, the elderly, factory workers, volunteers. You can be really charming, and you can be really warm in person. And it's time to let more Americans see that. My radio listeners today offered their own advice for what you should do before the midterms, and one suggested a twice-monthly fireside chat where you explain important policies to voters and introduce them to the people who will be impacted positively by those policies. I think it's a good idea, and it's great politics as well. And I also like the fact that you deliver your message directly in that scenario, with or without the media's coverage of it. I say it's now time to govern all the people, to take your agenda to the inner city, to suburbia, to the churches, and to the areas of the country that have been somewhat or really unreceptive to the populist conservative message. It's hard to be a national party, isn't it, when every presidential election cycle we write off California and New York right off the bat. And there's no reason the Democrats should have a monopoly on the coast. That's absurd. Just go and try there. Give it an effort. And at times, just your presence, just showing up and listening, can be the most powerful action of all. And I say, if that isn't empathy and a winning strategy, what is? And that's the angle. Joining us now for reaction here in Washington is Byron York, Washington Examiner chief political correspondent. With me here in the studio is Congressman Sean Duffy, Republican from Wisconsin, and two Democratic strategists, Joe Trippi and Scott Bolden. Gentlemen, it's great to see all of you. All right, Trippi, let's start with you. Where am I going wrong here? You heard the angle. President Trump, not where he needs to be in poll numbers. You know, there are polls that say 32, some says 38, 35, but it's not where he wants to be, obviously. Do you think that President Trump can bring his numbers up? Don't make any cracks about they can't get any lower. They can. Can he bring his numbers up next year with some of these initiatives going to the people, selling this message?
I thought you nailed it in terms of some of the things he needs to do, like get rid of, I'd go a little bit further, not some of the Twitter, but just about all of it. He often gets in his own way of his own accomplishments. I mean, he has had them, but then the next day he tweets something or attacks somebody. And I think that really gets in the way of his message. And you're right, the mainstream media, all the media jumps on that and makes him pay for it. But they would make any president pay for doing some of the things.
The ferocity and the velocity of the attacks on the media to Trump are. I worked for Reagan. I thought it was bad then. I've never seen anything like I'm saying now with the press.
But he drives that narrative,
that's what I mean.
though.
He likes that fight.
He may have these policies. Republicans may like his tax cuts and his popularity and talking directly to people. But then there's this other bucket. This other bucket is tweets, the way he tweets anti-Muslim information or videos.
Anti-Muslim?
Anti-Muslims, whereby the British nationalists, which was quite offensive to so many people.
I think what some of the Islamists are doing across Europe is really offensive. But
but they argue that this video was fine.
But you think anyone next November is going to think, oh my gosh, Donald Trump tweeted something from London, but the GDP is 4.2%. I don't think anyone cares about that.
That was an example.
Happening right now.
Yeah, but I don't think that one example. I don't think that one example. We got to get Duffy in here, but I want to get back to you. Then Byron York will step in.
I don't think it matters what Donald Trump does. The media hates him, and they're going to go after him for the smallest error. You're partially right, Laura. I don't know if it's a fireside chat. I don't know if that's Donald Trump's thing, but he's great at rallies.
Yeah.
Get out there and talk
to people
directly to the Americans.
Policies are going to be better for African Americans, Latinos,
but he doesn't
new
even use the term African Americans. What is his national urban agenda? He wants to take credit for black employment.
First of all, some of the lowest rates in the African American community and lowest rates in the Hispanic community that we've seen in decades.
And in the white community as well.
But hold on one second. He talks directly to the American people better than anybody else. He's doing a rally every month. Do a rally every week. Speak directly to them. Every network covers it. Pass tax reform, grow the economy, put more money in people's pockets, build the wall, accomplish the agenda. This guy in our party is going to do great.
Let's go to Byron on this. Byron, I love the view that the voters want a calmer. They want a slightly calmer landscape, and that's not easy because of lots of incoming, and he wants to smash back. When someone hits him, he hits back, and it's worked for him usually. In the long run, it has usually worked for him. And he was derided for doing this in the campaign by a lot of people, probably Joe, at times you, and Scott, sometimes you. And it worked. And all these naysayers in the media told me the polls were going to destroy him. He was destroying himself. In the end, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, Wisconsin, etc., turned out because they thought the country was going down the tubes. Can he turn those numbers around, though, given the current landscape?
Well, a couple of things. We have heard these complaints, you're right, throughout the campaign, throughout his presidency. And we've heard a lot of Republicans who admire his sheer political talent, that unique talent that he has. And they always say, well, gee, you know, if he could only smooth off a few of those rough edges and not do some of those tweets. And when this is brought up with the president, I mean, he'll basically say, and how many of you have been elected president? This is something that he sees as having worked for him. And I think his big challenge next year is to get Republican voters and some independents to judge him on the substance of what he has done rather than the style, which does turn off some voters. And there certainly is something called Trump fatigue. It actually exists out there. But I think you're likely to see, especially with the situation in Congress, everybody's going to be running for office. He'll be using his executive authority more and telling the voters what he's done for them. And he's got to try to get them to pay the attention to that style that to the substance that you opened the program with.
Joe.
Look, I think, first of all, I think Byron's right about it. He's not getting measured by the substance right now. Look at the things that they list off. That the Wall Street is gaining, breaking records every day. The unemployment, the number of jobs created, all these things, right? The economic confidence that the American people have, right? Okay, well, when you have that stuff through the roof, your favorables are supposed to be through the roof. And they're not. Yes, the media's out to get him, fine. That's not it. That's not it. No, that's what the charge is going to be. It's because there's something wrong with his style that people do not like, and he loves that fight. And if he just put the fight away, he'd have a chance to reach out.
Because the media bashes him so much, I don't think people are willing to tell pollsters that they support him. In Wisconsin, the last poll we had, Donald Trump had an approval rate of 33%, and he won Wisconsin. So I don't think people feel comfortable saying that they support him as much as they do.
Maybe, but Donald Trump drives that narrative. If the media is going to bash him, then they're covering him 24/7, and they're covering the negatives about his personality, about how offensive he is, and credibility. Hold on. Credibility, super important. I think one report I saw from the Washington Post, like him or not, is that in the first year he's told like 3,500 lies in his tweets.
How many has the Washington Post told?
Well, you can take anyone's. I don't know.
I'll do the Pinocchios on them sometime.
But he's got a lot of Pinocchios. He doesn't have an urban agenda. He wants to claim credit for black unemployment being down. Scott, white unemployment is being down too. The economy is percolating.
Scott, let me get in here, Scott, because this is what drives me crazy about the identity politics in this country. On the one hand, it's what are you going to do? No, because I want to reach out to communities that have a negative view of Republicans.
But the president hasn't, and that's why he's having problems with them.
Let me finish. What I think is an objective fact is that the economy is improving. Donald Trump is a charming person. I know at times he gets a little defensive. That's fine. But he is a charming personality, and he's an engaging personality. I think what the Democrats fear most is Donald Trump actually taking his case to the African-American community in Detroit, in Chicago, in Oakland, in parts of Florida. I think they don't want him to do that because I think the Democrats are fresh out of ideas. They've tried everything, and 40 years later, the war on poverty was a whopping failure.
You know what?
They know it, and we know it.
I'd love for Donald Trump to go to Detroit and Chicago and L.A.
Right.
One, he'll never do it.
If he'll have a respectful hearing.
But he can't. He can't.
He can't. Why? Because African Americans don't want to hear from him?
No, because he doesn't have a message for them. He's offensive to them. He's done nothing for them. He talked about an urban agenda. What urban agenda?
What is your urban agenda? Handouts?
What's his urban agenda? No, it's not handouts.
Then what is it? An economy that creates jobs?
No, I want full employment, job training.
Well, that's what we're getting. Do you want more illegal immigrants in your
community? Because of Donald Trump? Go to those black communities and say that.
Do you want MS-13 in your community?
No, I don't, and I don't want gangs in my community.
They're out.
And I don't want racists in my community.
They're out. So Donald Trump's a racist. You back on that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, now
he equivocates. He is. He equivocates on whether white nationalists and Ku Klux Klan are good people or bad people.
Watching right now, I want you to understand what just happened on this show.
I told the truth.
I find this to be so sad for this country. Donald Trump in 1 year has done more for the African-American standard of living than any president in my lifetime.
Name the top three things he's done. Name the top three things he's done. Focused on African-Americans and communities of color.
And right now, the response to that is Donald Trump has to be a racist okay, so he's offensive and a racist, but things are getting better in the African American community for entrepreneurs, for mothers who want to send their schools to other than failing public schools.
Send their kids to other schools.
Right, and if school choice and you dominated. If school choice and economic opportunity are not emancipators in the inner city, I don't know what is. And getting rid of the MS-13 drug. Sean, go ahead.
There's not black economics, Hispanic economics, and white economics. There's economics. And Donald Trump is doing it right. And when the economy grows, it helps black, white, brown. It helps everybody out.
The economy was growing under Barack Obama.
Two quarters in a row with 3% growth. You know what 9 out of
He inherited the worst economy since the 30s under a Republican. Because it's the truth. We get back to the truth. I'm sorry.
Trump's a racist. Okay, let me just get this straight. Trump's a racist, and it's Bush's fault. That is the Democrats' playbook right now.
Barack Obama brought this economy back.
And Trump's a racist. That's all you got. Byron, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, you know what you said about the Trump and Donald Trump and going to areas with large black populations, large Hispanic populations. That is true for every Republican, because the first thing you do in the most important thing you can do in a campaign is to show up. That's what Mitt Romney didn't do with Hispanic voters.
We told him to do it. He didn't do it.
In 2012. And look, it's not like they're going to come to a rally and then all vote for you, but voters appreciate when you care enough to show up. And the president could do that in this upcoming campaign. He's got a lot of Republicans to campaign for. I will say one other thing that has to do with what's going on right now. If he can say he has delivered a middle-class tax cut, that will help him.
All right, guys, I appreciate it. I wish we could go on for an hour. It'd be great. And I still love all
And another thing.
And I love all my pets.
And another thing.
Breaking just moments ago, Deputy FBI Director Andy McCabe just wrapped up with the House Intel Committee after 7.5 hours behind closed doors. So what was his role in that so-called insurance policy text from Peter Strzok? We have exclusive reaction. Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe just wrapped up with the House Intel Committee after, get this, 7.5 hours behind closed doors. McCabe may hold the key to unraveling the entire insurance policy text between Peter Strzok and his mistress, Lisa Page. Joining us now to analyze, Saul Weisenberg, a former deputy independent counsel who conducted grand jury questioning of President Bill Clinton in the Whitewater investigation. He joins us now. Saul, wow, 7.5 hours. Even if I am a little tongue-tied at the top there. 7.5 hours for McCabe. What does that tell you, if anything?
It tells you they're very angry at him. I mean, you're talking about a person who wouldn't understand a conflict of interest if it jumped up and bit him on the butt. And they've probably been waiting to talk to him for a long time. I mean, my God, you're talking about a lawyer whose wife took $700,000 from a Clinton crony, and he refused to recuse himself from the Clinton investigations until there was a Wall Street Journal story about it, and by then it was too late. They were closed.
Well, Republicans, more of them, are coming closer, and at least one calling for him to step aside. I think a lot of folks are hesitant to say that about Mueller, although some are. But it seems to me, given everything we know about McCabe, from his wife to the conversation, or they learned something about that conversation, I imagine, that took place before the election that Mr. Strzok was referring to in those texts about an insurance policy. And at this point, I think he's the weakest link at the FBI in this current situation.
Laura, nobody over at the Bureau can believe. I talked to former agents. I talked to people who are currently at the Bureau. Nobody can believe that he's still there. It's astonishing that he's still there. I wouldn't tarnish Mueller. I notice you didn't pass up the opportunity to tarnish Bob Mueller with McCabe. I wouldn't do that. Mueller has nothing to do with the things that McCabe did before Mueller came onto the scene. If you talk about the insurance text, the insurance policy text from Strzok, what possible innocent explanation is there? He says we can't take the risk that Trump will be elected. We can't take the risk. I mean, how can you? There are only embarrassing and more embarrassing explanations. There's no completely innocent explanation for that. Worst case scenario is, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think, yeah, go ahead. The worst case scenario is they were trying to stop Trump from becoming elected and get that FISA warrant on a phony basis of that dossier. But they're trying to say now, through various sources going to the Wall Street Journal, that they were actually trying to, in a way, help Trump if he were elected by getting finished with this investigation, correct?
That is ridiculous. They're also saying, I've also heard a rumor floating around that the insurance policy was for them to keep their jobs, which is equally ridiculous. An FBI agent doesn't have to worry about, I know, an FBI person at that level doesn't have to worry about keeping their job in a new administration unless they've committed malfeasance. So unless he was worried about his handling of the Clinton email investigation, I'm talking about Strzok now, he had nothing to worry about. It's a preposterous explanation. I suppose the best explanation, the most innocent explanation, is we can't take the risk that he's going to get elected and not let us investigate him, so let's get this investigation started now. But even there, it's obvious they're rushing things. They're not doing it the right way and the meticulous way.
I have a question for you. So why wouldn't Jeff Sessions at this point fire McCabe? I mean, that doesn't bear on the Russian investigation. I know he recused himself from the collusion investigation, but why couldn't he fire McCabe now? He could, right?
Well, he has the power to fire McCabe. I've heard different things about how broad his recusal was. I mean, one interpretation is he said, I won't have anything to do with the election at all. And I suppose somebody could say, well, that has to do with the election.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
But I think he could do it. But look, President Trump can call up Christopher Wray and say the guy shouldn't be there. And he has the power to do that.
He'll be attacked for it. So he's
attacked for everything.
Yeah,
you know,
but he won't do it. He won't do it. And I think you're probably right. In the end, he probably shouldn't. Saul, thank you so much. Another great analysis. But there's another big question, by the way, in the Russia probe, and it's whether Bob Mueller's acquisition of thousands of Trump transition team emails was proper or even legal. And this may have echoes, believe it or not, when I was a Reagan administration appointee, of the Iran-Contra affair. The conviction of Colonel Oliver North was overturned in that case after a judge ruled the independent counsel's office evidence was tainted due to the way it was obtained. Joining us now, Ali himself, Fox News senior military analyst, host of War Stories, airing weekends on Fox Business. So, Ali, is there a comparison here we can draw to your case?
One basic premise. Independent counsels are, a way for Congress to evade their responsibility for government oversight. Number two, they are fishing licenses for everybody who gets hired to be a special prosecutor and all their staffs whose goal it is to bring down a president. And it's been that way since 1875.
This is a special prosecutor, which is slightly different from the independent counsel, but nevertheless, your point well taken.
And what Lawrence Walsh did, of course, was to use tainted testimony against Admiral Poindexter and me, and both of our charges were thrown out. Walsh went on for 7 years. When folks were asking me several months ago if it was a good idea to appoint Bob Mueller, whose reputation has been untarnished. He's a hero for the Marine Corps. He and I were in Vietnam at the same time. He's been decorated with a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star. He had longest serving record as the director of the FBI, former U.S. attorney, former deputy attorney general.
Okay, put him on Mount Rushmore. I'm sorry. Just because he was all that, I don't think he's unimpeachable.
He's surrounded by people who hate Trump.
Right. So what does that say about his judgment in this case, Ollie? I know he was a war hero, and I respect that so much.
All I'm telling you,
he made critical decisions. Saul gets mad at me when I raise this, but I think he made critical hiring decisions.
Well, remember,
his judgment is off.
They were all referred by people inside the Justice Department who go all the way back to some of the things that the Clintons were doing.
Right, but a lot of them were from his firm, Wilmer Hale. He worked there. He knew their political allegiances.
I'm telling you that this process is set up to bring down a president, and that things are happening right now that have, quite frankly, destroyed the reputation of Bob Mueller. I kind of wonder why he's still there. Not because the president's going to fire him. The president said yesterday and again today he's not going to do that.
That's a media wish. That's a wishful
thinking. Why
thinking.
does Bob Mueller want to continue in the job? That's a question he's got to be asking himself tonight.
Ollie, when you look back, 1987, and I remember I was a speechwriter in the White House at the time, and I remember watching your motorcade go down to Brendan Sullivan's office and back, and that was such a wild time for the country. Could we be in for another, scenario like we were back then?
The building right behind you, Laura, they will never hold another hearing like that. They'll never do that again. And that's one of the reasons why things like Benghazi got dragged out for months, years, and nobody still knows the answer, going all the way back to 2012. The bottom line of it is that building is full of 435 people in the House and 100 in the Senate who don't do their jobs, and they should.
They don't. Well, they don't want to hold. They don't want to ask the hard questions and make the hard decisions.
Well, and they tried once with a fellow by the name of Clinton. Where did it end up? In the Senate of the United States, and they voted not to convict.
Well, the Democrats had that pep rally. Remember that? They went and supported Bill Clinton after that. They had the big pep rally.
That's why we have a special prosecutor, because they will not do what they're supposed to do and they've been elected to do.
Trump presidency, the big speech yesterday, the media. Can we play that little clip, Tommy? We have let's listen. Let's watch.
Did he read this thing he put out? Because it doesn't square with the words he spoke.
The tone's been all wrong with the president on foreign policy and national security.
There's no talk about transforming the world to bring democracy to the Middle East. Wasn't talking about bringing China or Russia into the international community at all.
I just love it. I love watching these people.
You know why? Because they can't say they want to put America first. Ronald Reagan did it, and you and I know that because we were there. And this president's doing it. And it's high time. And that's one of the reasons why there's a town full of permanent bureaucrats who some call the deep state. They hate Donald Trump for standing up for America.
They don't want their jobs ever cut. Well, they want it to grow.
Tomorrow morning, after the Senate votes tonight to approve, it goes back to the House, there will be an enormous tax cut for Americans. And you and I and every American watching us will be better off for it.
Ollie, it is so great seeing you. Thanks. Wonderful. And by the way, Ollie, did you know that the Obama team has some... Underage and need an abortion? Well, just come to America. Bienvenidos. No visa needed. Federal Judge Tanya Chutkan, of course an Obama appointee, ruled yesterday that the Trump administration must let two illegal immigrant 17-year-olds, one's 17 actually and one's 19-year-old. There was some confusion on that. The government will not have to pay for the procedures, however, but the ruling stymies the Trump administration's efforts to reverse Obama's policy, which allows abortions for illegal alien minors in custody. This is a crazy world we live in. What could possibly go wrong? We're not going to become an abortion magnet or anything. Joining us now from Boston is trial attorney Rachel Self, who specializes in criminal defense and immigration law. All right. Now, I'm trying to understand this from a different perspective. Okay, so these young women came to the United States, as far as you know, when, Ms. Self? Did they come while they were pregnant, or did they get pregnant after they were here?
Well, according to what I've read about these cases, one of the women, when she immediately got here and learned that she was pregnant, had requested the abortion. She was at about 10 weeks at that time. And another one of the women was even less further along than that. What happens is when these young, and they're not women, they're girls, but when they flee their country and come here, they get examined upon their entry to the United States for basic medical care and needs. And that's because it's been discovered that almost 80% of them on their journey here wind up victims of sexual violence. And
right,
so there are studies that show that. So
enforcement, yeah.
Well, and so the these actually aren't part of immigration and customs enforcement custodies, because in the 80s with the Flores settlement, they became part of the health and human. Well, no, it's the health and human services.
Well, they're in ICE custody. They're in ICE custody.
They're not in ICE. They're not in ICE custody. Yeah, and there's confusion about that.
They are. Yeah. Well, where do you think
they're not in
are?
ICE custody.
They're in detention.
It's in the purview of the They're in the Refugee and Resettlement Office. Okay, and that was
but they're in custody. They're not walking around in the streets.
They are. No, they're not. They're not walking around in the streets.
Okay.
They're in
let's not split hairs here. That's not important. What's important here is just a basic question. Is it the responsibility of the United States to be a magnet for those who want to come here, have children here, come here illegally, or come here pregnant to either deliver their child then becomes an automatic U.S. citizen, or to come here and get an abortion paid for by a sponsor? I know a lot of people probably think the government should pay for it. Is that our responsibility? And if so, under what principle is it our responsibility? I'm not talking for American citizens. I'm talking for illegal immigrants who arrive here. They're not supposed to be here, obviously.
It's a really good question, Laura. And to go to your point, exactly, these girls actually wanted to, when they learned that they were pregnant, they wanted to get abortions. So they weren't looking to have babies here. They wanted actually just to get the abortion taken care of once they learned that they were pregnant.
Taken care of, it's a baby. Okay. It's a baby. And in one case, the baby is preborn at almost 6 months of age. Do you know what a preborn baby at 6 months of age looks like?
To obstruction. And nobody's talking about late-term abortions here, Laura. And that was due to obstruction by that was due to obstruction by the administration. The girl originally wanted it at 10 weeks of age.
Life.
Now, there was a Texas judge. Now, people in Texas vote for the judges in Texas.
That's what a baby looks like. Hold on. You're talking, but I want people to know what's on the screen. So I think that we really
should stick to the law, because showing pictures like that doesn't go. I don't have a monitor.
Okay,
Laura.
Well, guess what? When you get home, check your DVR. Look at that baby in the face. Look at that baby, and you tell me that baby. No. I'm going to have to cut your mic. I'm going to have to cut your. No, I'm going to cut your mic if you don't listen to me, because this is important.
We're not interested in discussing the law. We're not interested in discussing the law.
And the fact that the judge says it's the law doesn't mean it's necessarily proper, or judges get things wrong all the time.
The Constitution, the Fifth Amendment, the 14th Amendment, they all say that it's the law. And a Texas judge ruled in the best interest of the child,
right to an abortion in the United States?
In the best interest of the child, this girl needed to have an abortion.
No, she didn't need to have an abortion. No. Okay.
A Texas judge appointed a guardian ad litem and determined.
Mute the mic.
Okay, but what we need to do is stick to the law, though.
Okay.
It makes sense.
Now, the law makes sense. So when you get home, and as a human being, we were all former embryos, correct? As a human being, I just want you to look at that face that we just showed on the TV screen. I know it's inconvenient. There she is again. Now, stop. I want
you're showing things that I can't see. You're showing things that I can't see.
Okay, I didn't show you a hamster.
And I'm happy to look at it, Laura, but for right now, what I would like to do...
I showed you a baby.
That is a baby. That's completely fine, but I think that you're getting completely sidetracked here.
It's not a hamster. It's not a piece of tissue.
We're here to discuss
it's a baby.
What the judge's rulings were yesterday.
That's why you're talking over
It doesn't make me... I can't even see it at this point, so that's fine. You can show what you want to show to the viewers, but for right now, what makes the most sense is to discuss what the law is.
Tommy, can you please stop?
Constitution, the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution does not say in one provision
to every single person within the jurisdiction to not be denied basic medical care, and
A
that
baby
is why a
is
guardian,
not a disease.
that is why a guardian ad litem was appointed to the child who was pregnant.
Tommy, stop.
And
I can't hear her. I can't hear her talking over me. Okay, guys, just this is my one thought. I understand what you're saying about what the law is. I understand that. But we're talking about a human being, and we're talking about an illegal immigrant who has violated our laws. Okay? That's all I wanted to say. We're not talking about hair splitting of the Fourth Amendment or Roe versus Wade. We're talking about not a medical condition. We're talking about a baby. That's all I wanted to say. And I appreciate the conversation. Okay, it's time to ask the big question of the season. And we have a special guest.
It's a privilege to serve as the President of the United States.
The geniuses at Disney have finally installed President Trump in the Magic Kingdom's Hall of the Presidents. He's reverberating behind me. There's only one problem. Now that the president has finally shown up there, will anyone know who the heck he is? Look at this. This looks nothing like Donald Trump. Was the sculptor out of town when they were making this animatronic figure? So you got the open coat and the long tie. You can't see it, but the tie goes below the belt. I just don't see Trump at all in this. So I asked the question, who does this look like? Some on the internet say it looks like a bloated John Voight. John Voight's never going to speak to me again. Or maybe I thought today an aged Lloyd Bridges. Looks just like, look at that, I'm right. Or maybe, does it look like Alec Baldwin? Kind of? Alec Baldwin's impersonation of Trump is the worst. I'm sorry, I don't like it. I think it's like that lip thing. Or others are, this is very cruel. I reject this at Christmas time especially. That it looks like Hillary Clinton. That is just, I completely reject that. Well, let me know what you think on Facebook or on Twitter at Ingraham. But you know what I think? They should get the guy who does the wax figures for the Wax Museum. Why can't that guy or gal do the animatronic? Because it looks really good. That looks like Trump. Anyway, whatever the case, Disney should be ashamed, or they might be their own way of protesting. Having to include Trump in their attraction at all probably drives them crazy. But do not go anywhere. I want you to hit me on Facebook and Twitter about those 3-4 options. A cooking segment? My goodness.
I'll check my email.
Oh, my goodness. Kimberly, great.
Have a good one.
Great job, as always. Welcome, everybody, to the Ingraham Angle from Washington. What the president should do next year to improve his popularity and perhaps prevent a midterm wipeout. That's the focus of tonight's angle. With the economy up, ISIS pummeled, criminals deported, 12 appellate judges confirmed, regulations slashed, and consumer confidence high, one would think that the president's poll numbers would be above 50. Well, they're not. Of course, the usual suspects in the media, you know, those same people who erroneously relied on polls in 2016, they're eager to hype the bad Trump news.
Today, we have a president with sinking approval ratings, an unpopular piece of legislation, the tax bill, supported by just one party.
24% approval rating among women. I've never seen a number that low.
The president's approval rating has fallen to 35%. That's a new low in our CNN polling.
That is something that is a record low for every president dating back to Eisenhower.
Well, all things considered, it is better to be a popular president rather than an unpopular one. Remember when Bush's popularity began to take a nosedive in 2005 because of the Iraq War and his response to Hurricane Katrina? That was brutal. Well, back then, W dismissed the reports of his low standing with the public. He didn't fret much or do much about it. Then, you remember, the Democrats went on to win the House, the Senate, and 36 governorships across America. Then what happened 2 years later with the economy in tatters? Bush's numbers cratered, and Barack Obama was elected. Now back to Trump. He has a strong populist core, and so, of course, he wants to be popular. And he understandably gets frustrated when his message doesn't seem to be breaking through. And truth be told, the president has made some missteps. He's not perfect. And, of course, the media pounced on them. The bungled travel ban, the firing of Jim Comey, and the decision probably to get involved in that Alabama Senate race at all. And then, of course, Democrats have harped on the phony Russian collusion story for a year. And this all had a cumulative effect on the public psyche. But now, with the economy poised to roar in 2018, liberals and their lapdogs in the press need a fresh narrative. They have to freshen it up. And citing the Roy Moore loss in Alabama and Gillespie's in Virginia, the New York Times and other outlets are reporting that suburban women, even those who voted for Trump, are turning on him. Well, they're supposed to be, I guess, put off by his brashness, his bluntness, his tweet storms, and now, well, say the CNN Trump bashers, his lack of empathy.
It's about expressing normal human emotion. It's about expressing condolences. He doesn't do that first. First, he exploits it for political purposes.
This administration writ large is engaged in a larger game of trying to contain the president's worst impulses.
What I hear people say, even diehard Trump people, is we want humanity in this country.
You know what? No politician can win without empathy. He won anyway, even with numbers that suggested people saying, we don't think he understands people like us. Is it catching up with him now?
Yes.
I think the answer is
you can't learn empathy.
You can't learn empathy. Well, I disagree with these clowns, and here's why. Maybe the president is sharing his empathy in a different way. And I